Hello everyone. Welcome to the inaugural session and episode of Windows to Origin. I'm very excited to be presenting this as part of Condesa Co.Lab, and we're dedicating it to intimate introductions to coffee producers all around the world, and giving an insight into production, processing, and what it's like to create coffee. Obviously, my name's Oliver Brown. I'm the sales manager here at Condesa. And I'm joined by Luiz Saldanha Rodrigues from Fazenda, California. I know I've mulled the name, Luiz, so you can correct me in a minute. Luiz is an agronomical engineer. Obviously, he owns Fazenda, California, but he's also managing and running Capricornio Group as well. And he's here to talk to us about all things coffee and his experience of coffee. So on that note, welcome, Luiz.
Welcome, my friend. Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's such a pleasure. I cannot describe in words. As you know, Australia is my second home. It's the country I traveled more in the last years than Brazil. So for me, it's a huge pleasure to share our experience and some of our knowledge with our Aussie friends.
Thank you. Yeah. So this is exciting for us, and this is sort of an opportunity for not just myself to ask questions I'd like answers to, and questions that I get asked, but also we've reached out on social media. We've had questions back from our followers and those that follow yourself, Luiz, and they've all posed some really interesting questions. So this gives an opportunity for baristas, roasters, anyone who's interested in the public to ask these questions. And we encourage, going forward for that to really continue. We want that discourse between barista, roaster, to sort of really get rolling. So yeah, it's really exciting to be able to do this. Now, we're going to sort of get cracking, but a lot of the questions start around harvesting and the challenges of what you do there. I want to sort of take it a step back. And in our introduction, we were talking about, before we came online, you were just talking about, preparing the soil, getting ready for harvest. Give us a bit of an insight into what's going on at the farm now, before harvest is starting. What are you doing on the farm to prepare Fazenda, California for what's to
come? So we are now finishing March, beginning of April. So we are just beginning the autumn. And autumn is the end of the development of the beans and the beginning of the ripening period that is gonna start in the end of April, start the ripening. So we need to take a huge care of the trees in terms of the control of plagues and diseases to assure we have enough leaf area to fill these cherries. So these cherries may have the ripening stage with all the energy that is necessary, that is produced by the leaves, with all the nutrients that need to be stored in the tree so they can fill these cherries. And to also protect the cherries from the sun. So we have this no external shading trees. So we self-shade the coffee trees with themselves having a huge leaf area. We are also managing the weeds because from now on the rains start to decrease. So you need to storage more water for the coffee trees so they may finish the ripening. And we are doing a lot with our biological tools. So basically we built a bio industry in the farm where we are growing different microbes, so bacteria and fungi, to promote the root system growth, to protect the trees from plagues and diseases, and also to make a bioprotection for the cherries. So, for example, we are spraying right now, last week and this week, we are spraying a combination between Bacillus subtilis, Bacillus pumilus, and Bacillus miloliquefaciens that basically will bioprotect the leaves and the fruit from the attack of fungi and other disease that may damage the quality. So we are giving the cherry, we are decreasing the stress for the plant, we are decreasing the ethylene production, so the cherry will have the right period for ripening. Besides that, we are finishing all the maintenance in terms of all the equipment, patios, dryers, pulpers, all the machinery. And we are also, side by side, we are preparing some areas because this year we will start planting some new coffee trees again. So it's a crazy time right now. All preparations for harvest, everything to keep the plants super safe in order to have the best cherries are possible, and everything to have the infrastructure for, because it's a war strategy. When harvest comes, the window is super short, and the way we need to manage to harvest these cherries, to process and dry, it's really crazy.
Wow. Thank you. That's an awesome answer. Give us a little bit more of an insight into right now. You've talked about, you're wanting those cherries to mature. Right now, are they still green, or are they starting to take on color? What does that look like?
It's still totally green. They are finishing the way the coffee develops. You have the flowering. Then you have a first stage where the beans are super small, and then they just multiply cells. Then these cells start to expand. Then the cells of the embryo of the seed starts to multiply. And the final stage is filling these cells from the endosperm, from the seed. So we are now just finishing the accumulation of dry mass from the seed. So the green's external is green. Internal, the seed is filling with dry matter, with carbohydrate, with starch. After this final stage of filling the beans with dry matter, then starts the ripening, when you start increasing the levels of sugars inside the seed. You start having breaking the celluloses and making the pulp. So until now, you don't have pulp. You just have a green, boring fruit. Why? Because the plant do not want to propagate these high species right now. So you don't want it to be sexy for birds to propagate. So it's green, the same color of the leaf, full of chlorogenic acids, full of caffeine, so it's bitter, and it's hard like a rock. So when it starts ripening, the trigger of maturation, the genes are gonna wake up. We're gonna start synthesizing ethylene, and this ethylene will start making this transformation. So increasing sugars, making this pulp, the metabolic ratios will increase, the respiration ratios of the fruit will increase, the chlorophyll that makes the bean green will be broken, and then if it's a red coffee, you are gonna have anthocyanin, the pigment that makes it red or winey. If it's yellow, you're gonna have carotene, so you're gonna change the pigmentation to make it sexy. It's gonna be soft because you're gonna break the celluloses, because now the seed, the embryo, is physiologically developed, and the plant wants now to propagate the species. So it's making it sweet, colorful, beautiful, and soft in order to propagate the species.
What is often the thing that triggers that change? What is it on the farm that does that? I think a lot of us assume we all know, but give us an idea of what is that trigger?
Plants think in what we call degrees per day. It's what's the English word? You make an accumulation of energy. We call degree per day. In wine, it's a well-known concept. So the basal temperature from the coffee metabolic ratio is 12 degrees. So the degrees that you receive per day that are over these 12 degrees and having light, you're gonna have an accumulation. So each each variety will have a specific amount of energy that will be demanded to trigger the maturation. So when you make this accumulation, you are going to start synthesizing the ethylene. And this is going to trigger the metabolism to make it ripen. If things go right. So if things go right, the description I gave you, the seed is going to be developed, and then it's going to become sweet, soft, and sexy. If you have any stress, hydric stress, light stress, nutritional stress, water stress, the plant is going to start synthesizing ethylene. And when you travel to origin, sometimes you see this. If the plant is weak, if the plant has a disease attack, a plague attack, instead of developing as a cherry, you see the red cherry, but inside you don't have a lot of pulp, the mucilage.
Yeah.
And the seed is also not physiologically done. So even harvesting a cherry, the seed is still immature. So sometimes you harvest a cherry, you process, and the coffee is just boring. It's just okay. It's not a beautiful, shining coffee full of flavors because you didn't give the right timing and the amount of energy in order the cherry could develop in the right way. The other thing is, for quality, we need to have thermic amplitude. So basically, the best average temperature for Arabica coffee would be around 22, 23 degrees. And the basal temperature, 12. Yeah. So when you have this range of 10 degrees, 12 degrees between day and night, you have photosynthesis during the day, producing organic acids, producing sugars, and storaging in the tree and in the seeds. And during the night, when the temperature drops, the metabolic ratio of the plant decreases. So these things keep storage in the seed. So when we are going to think about processing, this seed is full of starch, lipids, amino acids, vitamins, minerals that are going to be used for the seed metabolism because the embryo is alive, and for the microbial metabolism according to how you are processing this cherry. No matter if it's a natural process, a semi-dry or a honey process, or a wet, washed process, all of them are going to have this fermentation and the seed metabolism, consuming the things that were stored. So if you did not allow the plant to be healthy, have at least 20 square centimeters of leaf per bean, because this will assure you have enough solar panel, the leaf, to produce photosynthesis and to fuel the cherry. And if you don't decrease the stress, to decrease the ethylene production. So the key point is decreasing stress, leaf area, that is a good ratio, a lot of leaf area per bean. And then you are going to have this right timing in order the cherry can achieve the perfect maturation period and make all the process that are super complex in terms of biochemistry.
And so essentially, like as managing that, you're sort of making sure that the building blocks are there in the bean, so that when it comes to processing, you've got the best chance to make it happen.
The point is, there is a discussion if coffee is climateric or non-climateric. We still have some discussion, scientific discussion. So climateric fruits are the ones that have a peak of metabolic ratio before maturation. Coffee has that. But some climateric fruits, biggest part of them, when you harvest, even if you harvest them green, you can finish the maturation out of the plant. Bananas, papaya, for example. Okay? Yeah. But in this case, you are consuming the pulp. Coffee, we are consuming the seed. So coffee, if you harvest it green, and if the seed is not developed, it's not physiologically developed, it will keep green. There are also some treatments, some people try to apply external ethylene to the bean. So this makes the external part, the rusk, makes it red or yellow, but the seed is still immature. So you can harvest it's a fake cherry, but it still tastes astringent, herbal. So it's super complicated. and you really need to build these blocks, to build this raw material. So when you harvest a cherry, it's a true cherry. It's not a fake cherry or something that was forced to get out of the plant. So you need the plant needs to be happy plant, happy cherry or good cherry.
Okay, thank you. That's a very complete answer. Awesome. So from setting the soil, setting those conditions for the building blocks, we then go on to harvesting. And I'm gonna turn to social media land here. I got a question from Plant Juice Darren, and he asks, does Luiz have any tips on mechanical harvesting rather than hand picking? What's what's your thoughts on that? And do you do either both? And how do they benefit, sort of, or how do they support everything that we've just talked about?
The main point, again, is assure that we are harvesting cherries. So according to the environment that we are growing coffee, the conditions are totally different. So what do we have here? We are at 23.5 degrees south, surrounding the Tropic of Capricorn. So we are a subtropical region. That means a wet and cold winter. So our maturation window is short, and we need to harvest and process things super fast. So we use both selective hand picking and mechanical harvest, mechanical selective harvest. How do we selective pick with a mechanical harvester? There are several mechanisms. The first one, plants need to be healthy, and they need to have a lot of leaf area to avoid cherries being sick and to damage cherries when you harvest, no matter by hand or by the machine. So the plants need to be prepared for that. The second thing, we need to see, and we have annotations of when we had our flowerings. So we give a score between 1 and 10 for intensity. And we split the plants into 3 parts: the top, the middle, and the down part of the plant. So each flowering we have, I give a score each plot of the farm. So I had an intense flowering on the top. I had a medium flowering in the middle, or whatever. So I have this classification for the 3 or 4 flowerings we have. So this gives us the opportunity to know and to start planning how we're going to harvest. So we had a huge flower on the top. We know this is going to ripen first. So we may harvest just the top of the plant. So when you have the harvester and you have the stickers, you can remove the stickers from the down and the middle and just have the stickers from the up part. So we are going to harvest just the part where you had the first big flowering. This is one thing. The second thing, there is an index that is called the Selective Harvest Index for mechanical harvesting. And this index is the ratio between the vibration of the stickers and the speed. So as faster you go, comparing to the vibration you are using, less green beans you are going to harvest. So the selective index is something about half. You need to use twice the speed than you are using vibration. So for example, if you are harvesting at 1,000 meters per hour, so your speed, and it's this slow, 1,000 meters per hour, you should use 500 rotations per minute in the vibration. Every time you bring this index to close to 1, so 1,000 meters of speed with 1,000 meters vibration, you are gonna remove everything. Why? Yeah. Because the green beans are not harvested by the resonance of the branches. The green beans are harvested by attract. So you need to hit. So as much less vibrations per meter per time you have, lower the chance to hit a green bean. Yes. Then the position. So if you had the flower in the top, you have much less green beans in the top. if you have the flowering in the middle, so you can remove the top and just harvest the middle. So higher speed, lower frequency, change the position, and the regulation of the machine brake. So the brake will give the strength to go, to move. So as much tighter the brake is, more difficult it is to pass the plant. So more green beans you are going to remove. So you need to have light brake around 5 to 6 kilos to make a selective picking. And when you are making the repass, the last one, the third or the fourth time you pass in the tree, you need to tighten more the brake to clean the plant. So these are all regulations, and it's not that everybody knows these things may be done. So this gives you the opportunity to harvest 2, 3, 4 times a huge amount of cherries in a short window and with high quality. Why? Because if you don't do that and you have heavy rains, the ethylene production will go high, and then you are gonna lose the cherries. Another thing is nutrition. You need to make a huge nutrition in terms of calcium and boron to make the cherries really healthy, because this is a rainy region. And the phytosanitary, so we need to protect. That's why we are using the biological control to make this biofilm to protect the cherries, because as I told you in the beginning, when the beans are green, they are full of chlorogenic acid and caffeine. That's a natural protection from the plant against diseases. It's really hard to visit the field and to find green beans damaged by diseases. Now, when the cherries are ripened, you start having fungi and bacteria attack. So you really need to protect, because they are decreasing the level of chlorogenic acid and caffeine. So healthy cherries, a lot of leaf area, marking the flowering periods, the position and the intensity, and when they occurred according to each plot, each variety. And then we also use another tool that is an ethylene blocker. So as we have multiple flowering, we use potassium acetate that will sequestrate the precursors of ethylene production in the plant. So this is how we block that the first flowerings, and we have a much more uniform level of cherries, so each one weights the other, and we avoid losing cherries for the rains, for both mechanical and manual harvest.
For those of you watching who might not know, and I'm going to use our Australian reference, which the picking machine, I'm right, sort of sits across the trees, and it's sort of wheels on both sides, and it trundles down the line, similarly to the wine picking machines. Yeah, interesting.
Let's say the pen is the coffee tree, the branches are here, so the machines have the stickers both sides, and it passes through the line, and these stickers, they vibrate. So with less speed, higher speed, less vibration, less break, you can have much more cherry and less damage to the tree.
And the point is, obviously, the point you're getting at is, just because it's mechanical doesn't mean that you cannot have that ultimate control of harvesting. You're still able to choose which cherries come off, how ripe they are, all of that. You're in control.
I started coffee farming in 2004. And when I made my coffee specialization in 2007, 14 years ago, I worked with selective picking. In 2007, I made my monography on that. I used it to work with 100% manual harvest. And my results, I had 60% of sweeping, 60% of coffee in the floor. So if we are not fast, because this is a matter of, you have rain. So when the coffee gets ripened, you have 7 to 10 days to harvest. You cannot wait. So you need to have everybody done, all your manual picking, all your harvesters, and take the cherries. And because of 3 or 4 flowerings, you need to make it 3-4 times. So the difference of what we do from what the average from Brazil does, Brazil works with stripping. So you wait what would be the maximum amount of cherries as possible and harvest just once, or manually or mechanically, because of cost. The costs are really high in Brazil. What we do is focus on the cherry. And the other thing, our pruning program. We are really treating coffee trees as fruit. So it produces 1 year. All the focus is to restore the leaf area. The other year, it's going to produce cherries, and all the focus is on harvesting cherries. And as soon as we harvest 3, 4, 5 times, we prune and we restore all the coffee tree structure. So pruning like wine, like wineries. So as coffee produces in the branch of the previous year, we are going to prune each 2 years. Because grapes, they produce in the branch that grows in the same agricultural year, you can prune it every year, and every year it's going to produce. So that's the difference of cycle. But basically, we are managing coffee same as fruit, and we have a lot of manual work because all the branches are selected. So we don't hire people just for harvest. We have a full team that is specialized on pruning, on selecting branches, and on selective picking that works the full year in the farm.
Yeah, wow. But you still do hand picking for the sort of the very small nano microlots. So
yeah.
How is that challenge? Like, how has that been sort of? How are you managing that with, let's face it, the reality of COVID? How are you managing both mechanical and that hand picking process?
So since last year, when the COVID started, we created a specialized committee in the farm. So we have here a commission for health prevention and accidents prevention since 2007. So we created this special COVID commission. We created a manual with everything we need to do. We support everybody with masks, and these masks are changed every 2 days. Alcohol gel, procedures on how to wash hands. We split it on shifts of transportation. So instead of making 1 shift bringing the workers, we are making 2 or 3 shifts. So we have 1/3 of people per transportation per time. We have shifts of lunchtime to avoid concentration in our infrastructure. We are splitting the work in front to avoid people being together. And we are making weekly lectures with our security technician. So every week he comes, every Thursday we have a meeting with a technical lecture. We created a WhatsApp group from Fazenda, California for all the workers where we share high quality information and we keep everybody updated. We measure temperature 3 times a day before getting in the transport, before lunch, and before leaving the farm. And we have a direct channel communication. If anybody feels sick, the orientation is to stay home. And then if everybody gets sicker, the orientation is to go to the hospital. For God's sake, until now, we didn't have anybody with COVID. But it's the situation is really serious. So we are taking all the cares. In fact, thinking about a farm, as we are employing local workers, it's easier because we are not bringing immigrants for harvest, for example. We have our local workers that work here, so it's much easier to train, to share information, and the risks are much lower. It's different from countries that need to bring people from even other countries or other regions. And then the accommodation situation is really hard in order to have all this control. So that's how we are managing the situation.
Yeah, gosh. That's again, I think we in Australia sort of forget how challenging it still is around the globe. We're as far as things go here, the cases have been so minimal, and the day-to-day life isn't affected. So it's incredible to see all of those challenges that you're managing whilst doing harvest, whilst doing the preparation. There
is one thing: the plants don't stop. And this is the challenge. So we need to take care of people. It's our main focus. We really need to take care of people so we can also take care of the farm and their jobs. So we need to take all the care and make all the measures. So I still see that information is the best tool, and we are doing our best to share the highest quality information as possible to keep everybody protected and informed.
Yeah, fantastic. Good to know. Right, so moving on, and I know this is an area that has much interest, which is the actual processing, the fermentation, the preparing the cherry, and I think where a lot of that, you know, or at least where we as buyers and roasters and baristas understand that flavor development sort of happens, the fermentation process. I've got a question from Hugh from Australia, and he asks, what kind of microbial cultures and yeasts do you use for fermentation? And why do you use the ones that you do over others?
Depends. The answer is always depends. So some concepts on our processing history. So I assumed the manager of the farm with my wife, Flavia. She's also an agronomic engineer and also Q grader. We assumed this in 2004. So the farm was old school, stripping, and then for the first year, we tried to make quality. We had to renew all the plants because they had root system problems. So we made nursery, we plant new plants, and we started having a washing station because we didn't use it in a rainy region. So first year we pulped coffees, it rained, the coffees damaged the quality. Second year, we made a covered patio. We pulped coffee in the covered patio, so higher temperature with mucilage, bad fermentation. So I started traveling and learning and studying and going deeper and deeper. So why I'm telling that? All coffees, no matter which processing you are applying, you are going to have fermentation. And completely different from the wine industry, where you have much control when you control your starter culture or your microbes. The massive biggest part of coffee producers from around the world, they make what we can call wild fermentation. That would be the wild fermentation in wine. That means we don't know what's happening. So basically, fermentation is occurring with your natural microbiome or microbial environment, with not necessarily consistency and stability. So according to how temperature, moisture changes year by year in your raw material, your results are quite unpredictable. Okay, so when we start making washed coffees, what happens? You are pulping the coffee, so you are removing the external part where you have a lot of contamination. Mm-hmm. So if you are making a submerged fermentation, you are adding water, so you are going to decrease the temperature, you are going to decrease the oxygen, and you are going to dilute the sugars and all the nutrients that you have in the coffee pulp. With that, we are going to move select the kind of microbes that are going to work on that, and you are going to change. You're going to change the kind of fermentation is going to occur. So when making a fully washed coffee,
Give us an idea, as you talk about microbes, why are microbes important in this? What like, again, explain for those that perhaps don't understand, what are the microbes' role? What is the microbes' role within this?
Okay, so what is fermentation? So fermentation is a biochemical process that happens when microbes, yeast, bacteria, or fungi, in the absence of oxygen or with low levels of oxygen, is going to use one source of sugar to produce energy. So the fermentation is a method of obtaining energy by breaking sugars in the absence of oxygen. What is the result? The result is that metabolites are produced. Between these metabolites, organic acids, citric acid, malic acid, acetic acid, butyric acid, propionic acid, and volatile compounds, esters, superior alcohols, aldehydes, and ketones. What the new science, and when I'm talking about new science, is like 5 years ago, we start seeing the scientific papers, and we have now high quality material on that. what the scientific papers are showing is that these volatile compounds are flavor and aroma precursors.
Yeah.
So these microbes are using the coffee as a substrate to grow, to obtain energy, and are synthesizing metabolites that among them we have volatile compounds. And these volatile compounds are able to get inside the coffee seed. And when you roast, these compounds are going to be broken and transformed and changed in another compounds that are going to be flavor and aroma perceptors or descriptors. So what is beautiful and magic is that it's not one for one. So what is science? What science knows is microbes use coffee. So imagine if it's a natural coffee. The substrate is the whole fruit with the pulp, with the rusk. If it's dry in a covered in an African bed, so you have an aerobic environment. So in the beginning, when you have more water, you have more bacteria. As soon as you start losing water, the osmotic pressure increases, and then you're going to select more yeast that is going to synthesize esters and aldehydes like furans, and these furans have these fruit pulp flavors because of the yeast that fermented the coffee in an aerobic environment. Yeah. Now, if it's good or not depends a lot. The first thing is fermentation does not occur just in the tank. Fermentation occurs in all the process, starts in the field, occurs during the transportation. So for the ones that visit origin, if you place your hand in a coffee that just arrived in the washing station, you see that it's warmer than the whole mess. Why? Because fermentation is an exothermic process. What means exothermic? That produces heat, produces energy. So when the microbes are growing, they are producing energy, they are increasing the temperature of the environment, and they are synthesizing this bunch of things. So this bunch of things, they can migrate to inside the beans, and when you roast, these molecules are gonna give flavors. For example, when you have a washed process, some compounds that are common in washed process, for example, the methylfurfurol, that is a compound that is correlated with caramel and with brown sugar flavors. Or you can have, for example, the ethynyl methoxyphenol, that is the vanilla precursor. Or you can have, as I talked in the natural, the furfurol, that is this kind of fruity. So if it's gonna be a banana, if it's gonna be a pineapple, this is the tricky one. We have some markers that are well correlated, but bunch of them we are not being able still now to correlate. What we do know, if you make same raw material, washed, honey, natural, inoculated, then you run this thin biochemical analysis, and nowadays we have really sophisticated methods for that. You will see that the same raw material with different processing methods, the molecules you find inside the green beans are completely different, are different animals. What we still cannot do is say, you have this, the flavor is that, but we know they are different. Then you roast and you have a completely different flavor. And we still have the other part, that is the complexity of flavor perception. That is not, this gives you that. We have this complexity, and it's one of the things that I'm studying now. I'm making a neuroscience specialization, and my paper is going to be on the multisensorial perception of flavors. Things work combined. So when you have fruit flavor with high body, the sweetness perception bumps. So what we have, for example, in a washed coffee, when you roast, you don't have anything sweet. But this flavor precursors that I said, like the methylfurfurol, that gives you this idea of caramel and brown sugar, will give you the sweetness perception. And it's an odor. It's not a flavor, but it will give you the sweetness. So it's this crazy overlapping or matching.
So linking that into, so for example, your cold sole that you produce for us and for our customers, where that's one sort of, one bean, one area of the farm that you're taking these coffees from, and you can manipulate that cold sole to have like a wine profile or a sort of a pink strawberry profile or a tropical fruit profile. You're not doing that by adding a yeast here and a yeast there and a yeast here. What you're doing is you're understanding of microbial populations, temperatures, pHs, lack or no lack of oxygen. You're using those techniques to push the flavor rather than using a yeast which will give you that flavor. Is that right?
What is my problem? I am a natural complexity flavor lover in a cold and wet region. So when I tried to make naturals in the past, it was funky, it was complicated. Why? Because again, fermentation does not occur in the tank. It begins in the field, and you have a big part of the fermentation during drying. So for example, the honey coffees that some people love is something that instead of having the fermentation of the pulp in the tank like a washed coffee, the fermentation of the mucilage of the pulp occurs during the drying process. And that's why you have so much diversity between the honeys, because according to the time, the temperature, and the environment you are going to have different microbes using this pulp of the honey, and then you're going to have this, of course, the amount of mucilage, the black, the red, the gold, blah, blah. But making a black honey here, making a black honey in Costa Rica, in Colombia, they are not the same black honey. Of course, you have a lot of things, okay. But why I started doing the cold sole? The history is that amazing friend, brother of ours, Mr. Tim Adams from Australia, wanted a coffee for a competition, a natural with clean flavors and super stable. So with my difficulty on making naturals, one thing that I realized is that if I soaked this natural in the water, there was a fermentation happening that when bringing this coffee to dry, it was much easier than taking the fruit directly to dry as a natural. So if I just harvest a cherry and I place to dry in my condition, it takes super long, it's inconsistent, and it's super hard because you have all that pulp that needs to be consumed before drying.
Yeah.
But when I add in a tank with water, I realized that there was something happening that was helping to consume this pulp, and when drying was much easier. The point is that because where we are located, 23 South, and our water is pumped from 200 meters above the soil, inside the soil, our water is cold. Our water is around 12, 13 degrees during the harvest. And that's why we call the cold sole, or when we made first time, we call the tilita process because of tili. So what I realized after that, that's according to the temperature of the water and the temperature during drying, the profiles changed, and according to the variety. And then when we started opening, so when temperatures are a little warmer, we have this tendency of having these winey, dark berries, wine fruit. When we have an intermediate temperature, we have this tendency of strawberries, of raspberry, and according to how we make the first step, we can combine this with more Ledec approach. So it's super creamy, and you have this beautiful raspberry yogurt. And when the temperatures are lower, there is this tendency of this tropical, more pineapple, more peaches, more yellow fruits. So basically, we need a first step because our drying is super complicated because of our conditions. And when we change temperature, time, and drying, we can manipulate these profiles. In this case, we are not inoculating microbes. We are selecting natural microbes through changing the environment. So water, low oxygen. The risk of naturals is acetobacter that will change alcohol into acetic acid, likes oxygen and high temperature. So if I use water, I decrease the temperature and I removed the oxygen. So I will go much more for an lactic bacteria fermentation instead of acetic acid production. So the tank with water and low temperature, I am reducing the risk of the acetic bacteria. I would have this risk during drying, but I already pre-digested this mucilage. So when drying, I make this first stage faster, so I avoid having bacteria or acetic bacteria. And then I keep having yeast during the drying.
And that's interesting, because I think so often you think the fermentation process only happens in the tank, but absolutely not. It goes on well past the point at which it's out the tank, it's through the mill, and it's now on the drying beds. There's all of that still happening at that point.
There are also, and then you have the end. So what is the end? So when you think about fermentation, it's microbial succession. So first, the problem is human beings, as our brain uses a lot of energy, we have this tendency of trying to oversimplify things. So we don't use a lot of energy. So we try to, it's from our nature. But basically, everything is happening together. You have bacteria, yeast, and fungi, and everything is together in the cherry, in the water, in the pulpers. So as soon as we start processing, you have better conditions because you have more water activity, more moisture for bacteria. It does not mean that yeast and fungi, other fungi, filamentous fungi, are not also occur. They are, but you have better conditions for the bacteria. So as much more contamination you have, as much less hygiene you have, more spoilage or more competition for the substrate you have. And this is where the inconsistency or the instability or the defects come from. So as much more clean cherries, clean material, clean water, clean infrastructure, you start decreasing this risk. But then the beginning bacteria, then the best condition when you start drying, yeast. But in the end, you still have conditions for mold. And the filamentous mold are the risky and the bad guys like Penicillium and Aspergillus, because these are the ones that are responsible for producing mycotoxins. So long fermentation, too long fermentation, there is the risk of mold. And there are some new studies that I know that are being run by some groups in Brazil, really good scientific groups from the universities, working with fungi inoculation in dried coffee. So we are making a fermentation during dry, and they are creating some really nice, interesting profiles. So fermentation does not stop. The tank, the drying, the storage. So when applying starter cultures, one of the things that starter cultures, so selecting a microbe and applying, one of the things that these do is, as you have a massive inoculation of a yeast, for example, there are studies showing that this prevents the formation of fungi. So it's a biofilm protection against fungi attack during the storage, and there are scientific papers about this. Another thing is that starter cultures inoculations, specifically with Saccharomyces, it also prevents the formation of acrylamide during roasting. There are also scientific papers about this. So the use of microbes during fermentation is a completely new, crazy and beautiful world that we are just scratching the surface.
That's a good question. Probably leads us to a last, because we're getting on to 50 minutes here, and I know we could talk forever on this, and we've possibly only just scratched the surface of information here. But there's a good question from Xavier in Australia, and he asks, is specialized fermentation the future of coffee production? Or does it just occupy a small percentage of sort of the competition scene, or just a small percentage of global production? And do you think that's an area that will be expanded upon? And do you share that with other producers?
depends what we want for the specialty chain in the future. I have a dream. My dream is that in the future, according to the weather I had in the year, according to the clients I have, I would look to my varieties, I would look to a microbial library, and I would say, this genetics, this microbe, this client. And if you look to the wine industry, this is exactly what happens. So wine is well developed, is run in well-developed wealth countries. And for me, this is the key difference. So for me, if fermentation is the future or not in terms of controlling, so let's come back to compare wine and coffee. Wine, it's control. It's stability in terms of not producing defects. Of course, you have the flavor of the harvest. You know that it changes according to the harvest. Why it changes? Because the weather changes. You don't have the same weather. So you cannot think of a weather stability. The weather, each year is a different weather, even in the same climate zone. So for me, fermentation is a tool that may allow us protect from spoilage, bring consistency, bring stability, create flavor profiles, and keep the quality from the terroir, or keep the quality from the farmer, and give the farmer the tool to have a huge portfolio of products to offer to the market. So in my opinion, this is science, knowledge that should be shared and available for the coffee if we want to develop coffee as a wealthy industry like wine.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Thank you. And I think that that's a real challenge, sort of, going forward, isn't it, for any producer now? How do we make it? How do we take the next step and really make production of these specialty coffees pay for themselves?
The first thing, in my opinion, is like this good practice, and not every time it's shared. There are some mindsets, some concepts, like coffee is food. So we should have food grade standards on everything, on processing, we don't have, it. Biggest part of the farmers in the world, they don't have access to this kind of information or this kind of mindset. So hygiene, procedures, cleaning everything, cleaning equipment, cleaning raw material, cleaning the tanks, information, like taking information but making it useful, like what was the temperature, what was the time, how does it behave with this pH. But one thing for me is the key, is the feedback from the consumer. So one thing that we do a lot of things in the farm, and different from wine that we have the final product in the bottle, the coffee, we have the seed in the farm, but the final product is far away and several roasting and brewing processing from us. So if we don't have this short feedback, short in terms of this transparent feedback, Luiz, this worked, this not worked, this year is different, we cannot make the improvements. We are just being empiric. And that empirism nowadays, it's risky, it's expensive, and will not help farmers. We need consistency. We need feedback to know what works, what does not work. So you can choose, instead of just taking waves, things that are cool now, but maybe you're putting under risk your coffee. We need stability, we need consistency, and we need a future view, because it's a really long-term business.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Luiz. Absolutely love the detail and information you've been able to give us today. Really appreciate you joining and answering each of those questions in such detail. Can't tell you how much I appreciate it, and great to see you. Thank you so much for being the first person to be the window into Origin. And I kind of feel, the more we can do this kind of thing with yourself and with other producers, the better. So thanks for joining us.
My friend, such a pleasure. You know how much I love Australia, how much I love my partnership with Condesa. Is really part of our history, our development, and it's really a window to origin. For us, it's a window to the world. So you are giving us the opportunity to talk, to explain what we are doing. We are empowering farmers, but we're giving the opportunity to present the hard work, because you have a lot of science, you have a lot of professionalism on the roastery, on the brewing, on the coffee shops, but we are also having this more and more at origin. So for us, it's a pleasure to share. It's a pleasure to present. And for our Aussie friends, talk with Condesa, take these nanolots, microlots. There are some crazy preparations. There is an explosion of flavors in many of these coffees from a completely unpredictable region. So it's 700 meters south of Brazil, and you are going to have some completely crazy profiles that you not expect. So break some paradigms, talk with our friends from Condesa, and we can see each other very soon.
Thanks, Luiz. Really appreciate it. All the best.